14th of December 2013, 9:30 a.m. 20-year-old Adam Lanza, armed with 2 handguns, got inside Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, and started shooting whoever crossed his path. First, he shot the school principal, then he entered a classroom where he killed all the people in it. Of course, almost all defenseless children. Then proceeded to the next classroom where he shot few more kids. When he heard the police closing in on the school, he shot himself in the head. In all, he killed 12 girls and 8 boys ages 6 or 7 years old, and 6 adult school employees, including the school principal. Shortly after, it was discovered that his first victim was his own mother, who he shot in the face several times early that morning before heading out to school. He was armed with an automatic rifle, which was left in his car and not used in the shooting, 2 other handguns, and over 50 rounds of ammunition. If it wasn't for the police, the rampage would have probably resulted in double the number of victims, since he had plenty of bullets left when he committed suicide. There are many aspects to this massacre, and I'm going to focus on only one. What is a possible explanation for what happened? At first sight, this act defies any logic, and it is immediately labeled as the act of a disturbed person, a mentally disturbed person. Few massacres are more bizarre and reprehensible than this one. A young man who suddenly, without a history of violence, perpetrates the most horrific crimes possible, kills his own mother and 26 other human beings, most of them innocent children, most of them completely unknown to him. I will be very clear in delineating facts from my own interpretation based on working with adolescents afflicted with autistic spectrum disorder, which Adam Lanza is reported to have suffered of. First, let's review the facts, but more in detail. The murderer came from an affluent community. Never exposed to poverty, never exposed to emotional or physical abuse, raised by a family of supportive parents. Adam Lanza was last born of 2 sons coming out of the former marriage of Peter Lanza, a highly paid vice president of taxation at GE Energy Financial Services of New York area, and Nancy Lanza, a retired financial worker, for many years retired, and suffering of multiple sclerosis. His brother Ryan Lanza, age 24, appears to be self-sufficient, living independently in Hoboken, New Jersey. Adam Lanza's parents divorced in 2009 when he was 16 years old, for financial reasons, in an apparently amicable divorce. Father moved in Westover, a suburb of Stamford, Connecticut, while mother stayed in the couple's home in Newtown, Connecticut. Mother, Nancy Lanza, 52-year-old. Herself used to work in finance, but she retired many years before. She was suffering of MS, which was apparently in early stages. Adam was born 20 years ago, started his education in Sandy Hook Elementary School. His school experience must have been very tenuous. He was extremely isolated, identified by the school as a problem child right from the beginning, and taken into the care of the school psychologist. At 16 years of age, his schooling in the normal educational system became impossible. Mother decided to withdraw Adam from school and took it upon herself the task of continuing his education at home. As a result, he became more isolated, spending significant amount of time playing video games. Before the shooting, Mother started thinking of making major changes in her life, relocating on the West Coast, possibly in a foreign country. It was not clear if she was planning to take Adam with her or thought of an alternative arrangement for him. From here on, based on the typical mindset of patients with autistic spectrum disorder, I'll give you a psychiatrist's interpretation of the chain of events that led to this tragic outcome. It is a possible answer to the why question, unless we could ask Adam Lanza directly, which obviously we cannot since he's no longer alive. This interpretation is as close as you can get to the truth. First, what variety of autistic spectrum disorder did Adam Lanza suffer of? It is hard to say, since I never examined him. But there are 2 likely candidates: Asperger disorder and autistic disorder. The level of behavioral disturbance Adam Lanza appears to have exhibited is more typical for autistic disorder, but the fact that he was able to attend a regular school up to 16 years of age suggests more of an Asperger disorder, which is a milder form of autistic spectrum disorders. The main characteristic of all autistic spectrum disorders is the lack of ability to relate to others, behaviorally and verbally. The interaction with other human beings are generally avoided or awkward, difficult. The emotional and verbal responses to others are often odd, clumsy, artificial, and as a result, especially at early ages, there is a gradual rejection of these patients by their peers. That, combined with patients' lack of interest in such relations, results in patients being marginalized, disconnected from their age group. Occasionally, Asperger adolescents may strike some rare friendships with adults who are much less judgmental regarding their behavioral oddities. Sometimes these patients can come across as mature in their interests and mannerism, but those relations also do not last. There is a recurrent problem with autistic spectrum disorder patients that can be summed up imperfectly, though, by the saying, familiarity breeds contempt. What does that mean? It is typical for an autistic spectrum disorder adolescent of normal intelligence to be rude, crude, hostile with the main caretakers, but very shy, reserved, self-effacing with strangers. It is also common for patients with autistic spectrum disorder to have a remarkable memory, including memory for past slights, real or perceived, hostilities, rejections, injustices from others. I saw with these patients in my own practice intense angry reactions to events that happened decades ago. It is like the emotional charge of the events is as strong as the factual details of that event. What is not common is for patients to have a high threshold to pain. Adam Lanza is reported to have had a high threshold for pain and prone to injure himself by accident. On the contrary, autistic spectrum disorder patients can be very sensitive and even hate being touched or hate a certain type of clothing because of the tactile sensation it gives them. They often refuse to change clothes or have a very narrow choice of favorite clothes, which they use until they are completely worn out. Adherence to routines and apprehension towards any life changes is also prevalent. This leading sometimes to hoarding or holding on to completely unnecessary items or to unusual strong attachment to inanimate objects. The majority of patients with autistic disorder never end up engaging in major acts of violence, although unexplained temper tantrums and broken things around the house are not unheard of, and even occasional violence, usually directed towards caretakers, and rarely resulting in injuries more than bruises. What went terribly wrong with Adam Lanza? People look at this atrocity and cannot understand it. I see the media running like a chicken without a head, from blaming the illness to blaming the mother or blaming the access to guns. I'm going to make it as simple as it gets. The first unfortunate turn of events was the breakup of the marriage. This set up the stage for further isolation, since gradually Adam Lanza's universe shrank from father, mother, and brother to mother alone. The second turn for the worse happened when mother and school started blaming each other for the lack of integration and progress in his development. This is another unfortunate and typical reaction. Autistic spectrum disorder involves a long, drawn-out slug with the illness that needs from all involved parties the stubbornness of a bulldog, the patience of an angel, and the strategic skills of a Roman general. Very few people have this set of skills, and as a result, the treatment process fluctuates or stagnates. Dissent among people who are supposed to be allies in this battle is the norm. It starts with parents blaming the school for not doing enough, and the school staff feeling that their efforts are completely dismissed, minimized, or even worse, their competency attacked. So you have the common exchange of unpleasantries that lead very rarely to progress. In Adam Lanza's case, getting him out of educational system altogether was the second major mistake. And when I say mistake, that is a completely retrospective judgment, since that alone would not even by far raise concerns about such a tragic outcome. Mistake number 3. Mother's attempts to be Adam's savior appear to have ended up in despair and abandonment. Mother probably tried her best, but homeschooling resulted in nothing but Adam becoming completely immersed in video games as the sole brain activity for days on end. He became a recluse. This had the result to put him even further away from reality. The usual shooting games, where villains and heroes stand up to live another day as fast as you can reboot the game, must have led him to believe that there is nothing tragic about death. In a video game, you do not see the mothers crying, the victims screaming in agony, witnesses shocked and horrified, parents ending up in a living hell for decades, or siblings and friends emotionally scarred for life. These games portray violence as something that happens in a social vacuum, with no repercussions, and death as a minor nuisance, with plenty of opportunities to do things differently the next time around. Mistake number 4. Availability of weapons and the knowledge how to use them. It is the last step in a preparation of a disaster. Adam Lanza's mother made a classic mistake done by a great number of Americans. She overestimated the threat of aggression coming from outside as opposed to from inside the family and circle of friends. Despite study after study showing that the majority of violence happens among people who are related or known to each other, Adam Lanza's mother thought she's a good head of the household, taking care of the security of herself and her son by buying guns, ammunition, teaching her son how to defend himself, quote unquote. It sounds so logical to believe that a woman alone with a son who is virtually living on another planet needs a gun to protect herself from intruders, since in her mind, and probably other people's minds as well, she would be the ideal target for burglaries and robberies. A middle-aged woman, frail because multiple sclerosis, living with a child with a severe mental illness, with some financial affluence, that does indeed look like an ideal target for any burglar. So like any good American, you escalate your firepower by buying guns. But to make it worse, she did not buy one gun, but several guns. Did not just keep them around as an insurance policy, but allowed herself to sink into the gun culture. She made the crucial mistake of introducing her son to her newly found hobby. Shooting at the range became a mother-son leisure activity. Once this mistake is made, the probability of a major tragedy raises exponentially. Finally, mistake number 5. Mother considered a major change in lifestyle, relocation on the West Coast, or even in another country. This might not sound like much of a stressor for a young adult, or even a desirable change for most. Adam was at an age when most of his peers would like to go out there in the wide world, explore it, experience some adventure. The personality of an Asperger patient is different. Changes are painful and terrifying. It is not unusual for this type of personality to get into major fights about an old item that a parent threw away either by chance or deliberately. As for example in an attempt to get rid of a piece of clothing embarrassingly worn down to thread, but to which the Asperger patient is very attached. This kind of event may lead to major confrontations. If the mother planned to move alone and to leave Adam Lanza behind, then this would have been double the stress for him. Having to move out and live among complete strangers is indeed so painful as to trigger a major crisis response from him. So in summary, this is what happened. We have a young man afflicted with an autistic spectrum disorder, possibly Asperger disorder. This creates serious barriers in him relating to others, making connections with his peers. At 16 years of age, frustration sets in on the part of the schooling system and his mother that leads to him taking a turn into an even more isolated lifestyle. On one hand, he's immersed in electronic games, most of them violent shooting games, and on top of that, he is put in contact with the gun culture and gets trained in their use. He has now the mindset and the know-how to change the shape of his angry outbursts from screaming, breaking things into deadly assault. The prospect of a major change comes on the horizon, possibly living independent life, which he perceives as both terrifying and as a betrayal from the closest person to him, his own mother. Adam Lanza might have felt that his life was over and started choking with rage. His anger took the typical shape of an electronic game scenario. He went on a shooting rampage, but this time in real life, with real guns. Shot his mother, who was probably identified by him as the immediate cause of his pain. Then he went down the list of scores to set. The elementary school, in his mind, was the initial cause of his life falling apart. As usual for these patients, he must have externalized the problem, seeing the marginalization he experienced in elementary school as an orchestrated effort of his schoolmates to exclude him, treat him with contempt, or just simply ignore him. The elementary school was the first time in Adam's life when he faced his peers, the members of his generation, in numbers significant enough to make their attitude decisive for Adam's self-image and personality. In a way, the up or down vote of his constituency. He was voted down or out, and not because of any conspiracy, but because his illness deprived him from the usual tools needed to connect with other human beings, like empathy, reading behavioral cues, picking up emotional communications. First school day was the start of a painful realization that society rejects him. And this is why that period and that place was seared in his mind as evil. He drove himself to his former elementary school and killed everybody in sight. All of them were guilty in his mind for the pain that it was inflicted upon him. For him, these innocent victims were not innocent, but just stand-ins for his old schoolmates and old teachers. The problem was them. They were the sick ones, not him. He was just a victim. In his mind, he was taking revenge on the institution. He could not comprehend that you cannot step in the same river twice. Over 1.5 decades passed since his perceived torment in that school. For him, it does not matter that the members of that institutions are completely different, with no meaningful connection with the protagonist of his time. So he starts shooting everybody he runs into. Then he enters the first classroom and massacres everybody, proceeds to the next room and starts doing the same. But halfway through this gruesome process, he hears the police cars. We know that for reasons unrelated to his Asperger illness, he has a very high pain threshold. Probably there is no hesitation when he turned the gun onto himself and shot himself in the head. Now, the interesting part, the synthesis of this event, the take-home message. People usually are very confused when it comes to causes of anything, especially causes of human behavior. The public is not inclined to philosophize about any news, even major ones. People have a very limited time and want a synthesis. When they ask, why did this happen, which is the second question after anybody asks after the question, what happened, they want one sentence. Unfortunately, this leads to massive misperceptions or snap judgments that are ultimately not that useful. Here is a very brief lesson in causality. The causes of any event can be classified according to the time when they happen in remote and proximate. They can also be classified according to when an event can be identified as a cause, before or after the effect. Some causes are identifiable only after the effect because the likelihood in resulting in a specific outcome is rather low. I would define low probability as anything between 0 to 33% chance. Some of these causes can be identified even before the effect because the likelihood of leading to a specific outcome is high, which I would define as a probability between 66 to 100%. Then there is the concept of sine qua non cause. In real life, this type of cause is very rare since each effect is multi-determined, each behavior is multi-determined. You can think of a circle made of several sectors of different angles. Even a small sector, if missing, then you have no circle. So when it comes to complex human phenomena, and most of human behaviors are complex phenomena, each cause, even minor ones, can make or break the final outcome. All these categories of causes do not overlap. A cause can be remote but easily identifiable before the outcome, or proximate but very difficult to identify before the outcome. So getting them organized, the causes of Newtown Massacre in chronological order are: divorce of parents, decision to homeschool Adam, not stopping the slide into complete isolation and total immersion into electronic games, exposure to gun culture and instructing Adam how to use them, unmanaged process of individuation. That means the decision to move from a familiar to a very unfamiliar environment without enough or the right kind of psychological preparation. And finally, access to guns and ammunition. Now the synthesis that the public wants and learn to expect in a situation like this. If you put this whole thing in one sentence, then here it is, rather lengthy sentence. The exposure to gun culture of an individual with a certain constellation of psychological characteristics, plus a specific set of life circumstances. That's pretty much it. This is the one single sentence that contains everything. But let's see, what is a take-home message? The exposure to the gun culture, that means mother's decision to buy guns, to train Adam in the use of guns, Adam's immersion in the artificial violence of electronic games, and, importantly, physical access to guns, are all the single most important aspect of this tragedy. Not quite a sine qua non condition, but coming very close to that type of condition. This situation, this context, gave Adam the means to translate his skewed views of reality into grotesque behavioral responses to these views. The gun lobby reaction will be as it was always. Since this event is multi-determined, the gun lobby will choose to harp on the need to change the other moving parts of these tragic events. They will tell you that this illness was the illness was the problem, that the way the guns were handled and taken care of were the problem. Anything but the fact that this society allows private individuals access to guns. Of course, it is worth addressing all the other causes, and I'm sure that this will be done more in the future. But it is absolutely absurd to keep on tinkering with fractions of the problem while letting in place the bulk of it. Here you have it. Do you whatever you want with this insight. But if you ask me, getting rid of the freedom to bear arms is a minor inconvenience compared to the unbelievable price that the society pays for this right. By no means, this is not a rant against gun ownership. It is just a matter-of-fact psychiatrist perspective on a tragedy that involves many social, cultural, and healthcare aspects. Of course, the second important take-home message is how devastating a psychiatric illness can be, and the importance of addressing these problems early and stubbornly using everything that research in this field gives us: medication, psychotherapy, as well as manipulation of the psychological, social, and cultural environment of the afflicted person.